Hello, I'm Renee from the Bee and Bear Homestead, and today I'll be making a modified version of Ball Canning's recipe of Fiesta Salsa, and I'll create a tutorial to show you how. This is a great recipe because it not only uses your fresh garden tomatoes, but it uses cucumbers, which I still have in abundance this season, and peppers from your garden. So all the ingredients from this recipe I was able to grow myself with my husband, which is great. And I'll be using the recipe from the Blue Book of Preserving by the Ball Company, which is a great book. It definitely deserves a part on every home preserver's shelf. And I'm using the recipe called Fiesta Salsa. I am modifying it a little bit. A word on that, it's not safe to modify canning recipes if you're changing the amounts of foods and their acidity levels. So say you think, oh, I want to add corn to this recipe. I wouldn't recommend doing something like that because that's a low acid food and you might be changing the acidity level of your canning recipe, which isn't safe for preserving or might make it less safe for preserving. So the modifications I'm making, I'm subbing out some peppers. I don't like super hot peppers, so I'm subbing out some less hot peppers in my recipe. And it also calls for green onions, and I don't have a ton of green onions in my garden. So I'm subbing out some regular old white onions, and also going to be including some chives. But those are all things with sort of equal amounts of acidity, so it's safe to make those modifications. Just a word on canning safety because that's really important. And like I always say, make sure you've washed your hands and washed your produce and washed the surfaces you're going to be using before you get started, because that's the most important part of canning safety. Here are all the ingredients I'm going to be using in this Fiesta Salsa recipe. It calls for 7 cups of chopped up and seeded tomatoes, which I'm estimating to be about 2 pounds. We'll find out. I have plenty more in case it's not. It calls for 2 cups chopped, seeded, and peeled cucumbers. It calls for 2 cups of chopped, seeded banana peppers. I'm going to be using bell peppers grown in my garden. It calls for 1/2 cup chopped, peeled, and roasted Anaheim peppers, and a 1/2 cup of chopped jalapeno peppers, and I'm just reducing the amount of jalapeno peppers, and I'm not going to include the Anaheim peppers. A 1/2 cup minced cilantro, and I'll use parsley for that. A tablespoon of minced fresh marjoram, and I'll use oregano for that. A teaspoon of salt, and a 1/2 cup apple cider vinegar, 2 tablespoons of lime juice. The first step is to peel your tomatoes. So doing this can be a little tedious, but it's pretty simple. You just need to put your whole tomatoes into simmering water, and then after they've been in the water for about a minute or so, their skins will crack. Then you can use a slotted spoon to move them to a bowl of ice water to cool down. And once you have your tomatoes in the ice water and cooled down to touch, the skins peel off really easily. And so you can peel your tomatoes and chop them up into smaller pieces. And you want 7 cups of peeled and chopped up tomatoes in this recipe. Once you've got your 7 cups of chopped and peeled tomatoes in your pot, the rest is a little easier because you don't have to deal with the boiling water and the hot stove, and you just need to chop up your produce. So it calls for 2 cups of peeled and seeded cucumbers, and I will definitely seed my cucumbers this time. Sometimes I skip that if I don't mind having the cucumber seeds in a recipe. I don't think I want those sort of gummy membranes around the seeds in my salsa. So to seed a cucumber, it's really simple. You just cut it into fourths and then use your chef's knife and cut down the center of your fourth and get as much of that out as you can. If a little is left behind, it's all right, but just helps keep just the hard texture of the cucumber flesh in your recipe. So I'll cut up my cucumbers and then we'll cut up the rest of it. Oh, and by the way, the 7 cups of chopped up tomatoes, I said I thought maybe it would take 2 pounds of my tomatoes, and it took more like 4 to 4.5 pounds of tomatoes. So just in case you want to estimate how much produce you have, and if you have enough, count on at least 4 pounds of tomatoes for 7 cups. I've added my 2 cups of chopped cucumbers to my tomato mixture, and that unfortunately only used 2 of my cucumbers. I say unfortunately only because I have an abundance of cucumbers this season, but I'll find uses for them or give them away. So next up, I'm going to chop up my peppers, and I'm using just less hot pepper. I'm actually using bell peppers, and I'll use a few jalapenos, but I'm not going to use the hotter peppers that are called for in the recipe just because of my family's preferences, but you certainly can. The recipe called for the 2 cups of banana peppers, and I've just got 2 cups of bell peppers. And now I'll put in the jalapenos. Again, the recipe calls for a 1/2 cup of jalapeno peppers, and I don't know, maybe I could add more than the 3 I'm going to add, but if I want my kids to attempt to eat it, I feel like I'm going to be cautious and only add a few jalapenos into the recipe. So at least I know we'll enjoy it and not make something that people won't be able to eat because they don't like spicy foods. So I'll add my peppers, and then we'll get to the onion, both green, and I'll add a little regular white onion if I need to get to my cup amount with more than the green onion and chives I have, and herbs, and we'll be ready to start the canning process before long. I've got a combined 1 cup worth of green onions and white onions and chives. I'll add that to my pot, and next we'll put in 3 cloves of garlic. Well, I'm using garlic that we grew, and it's a little smaller, the cloves are. So I'm actually using 6 miniature cloves of garlic, but here's my little garlic clove. So, it's fun. This recipe is fun because all the ingredients in it are going to be from our garden this year. The only thing I'm adding to the recipe that we didn't grow is the lime juice, salt, don't have an ocean to harvest salt from, and the apple cider vinegar. So that's always fun. Add the garlic, and now let's do the herbs. We're supposed to have about 1/4 cup of minced cilantro. If you're one of the people who doesn't like cilantro, which my husband is, then parsley is a good substitute. So that's what I'm using. Parsley from our herb garden. And then the recipe also calls for a tablespoon of minced fresh marjoram, and I looked up substitutes for marjoram because I don't have that growing in my herb garden, and oregano is a good substitute for marjoram. So I'll be using oregano. looks like about 1/4 cup, and I actually have a little bit more I can add. Use my oregano leaves. You don't have to be super precise with these. You just want to get the hard stems off of your plants. Here's my little extra bit of parsley. All right, got my herbs nicely chopped up. Add those to the pot. And our last ingredients are going to be the salt, lime juice, and apple cider vinegar. The recipe calls for 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of lime juice, and 1/2 cup apple cider vinegar. Now we've got all of our garden produce ready to combine and can. Got all this pretty produce combined in my stock pot here to make the salsa. So now you need to bring it to a boil and let it simmer for 10 minutes. So while your salsa is simmering, you can prepare your canning pot and your jars. The recipe says it will yield 4 pints. I always prepare 1 extra jar. So I will get 5 jars washed in hot soapy water and in my canning pot with warm water starting to simmer around them while this boils for 10 minutes. The Fiesta Salsa has been simmering for 10 minutes. It's nice and sterile. My pot of jars is prepared next to it on the stove. It's time to can. I have a couple different tutorials showing how to can with boiling water bath canning. So feel free to check those out on this channel if you want a little bit more detail, but I'm taking my jar out of the hot water. I have a nice funnel there to help get the salsa in without making a giant mess, although some messes do occur. And then it's important to always check your recipe's headspace. This recipe says to leave 1/2 inch headspace. That is important because the food inside your jar needs room to be able to circulate. And jams and jellies usually only need like 1/4 inch headspace. Tomato products usually use 1/2 inch, and sometimes recipes call for a full inch of headspace, but that's a little less common. All right, so I've just wiped the rim of my jar with a clean washcloth. That's important to help you get a good seal. I've put on my lid and ring here and then make it finger tight and pop it back into your warm water. So repeat that until you've got your salsa in jars, and then we're going to process it in a boiling water bath for 15 minutes. For me this time, the recipe yielded 4 1/2 pints, plus a little bit extra that I will put in the fridge. Didn't quite fit into a 1/2 pint jar and didn't fill a full pint, so I'll just eat it in the fridge. So we're going to let this come up to a full rolling boil and boil it in a hot water bath for 15 minutes. My jars were boiling in the hot water bath for 15 minutes. So All you have to do now is take them out and put them on a wire rack or dish towel to cool. And listen for the little pop of the sealing jar. You want to let them cool and don't touch them if you can. I mean, don't mess with the seals for about 24 hours. There was a pop of a sealing jar. After about 24 hours, test the seals by lifting the jars up by the lid only. So you can remove the ring and see if you can lift the jar just by the lid. And if you can, it means you have a good seal and it will last in your pantry for years. So I've heard 3 of my jar seals. I bet the rest of them will also, and I'll have some nice Fiesta Salsa tucked away for another day. I hope you found this tutorial for how to can salsa from start to finish helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, I hope you will like and subscribe. I have a ton of other garden preserving videos on the Bee and Bear Homestead channel. And I'm making more as I'm preserving all the time. I think peaches are next. Maybe I'll make a video for canning peaches before long. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great day.